Grim morning and welcome to the Grim. I'm your host, Kristin. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Kensal Green Cemetery, located in London, England. The aroma of coffee mingles in the air. The gates stand open. Step carefully. It's time to descend into the hauntings of history. It's the first in the original of London's Magnificent Seven, stretching across more than 72 acres. Yet one must ask, is Kensal Green destined to become another historic cemetery scarred by the relentless march of progress? England is, after all, a small island with an ever growing population, and over the last few centuries, London has expanded at a breathtaking pace. In a cruel irony, the very cemetery built to relieve the city's overcrowded graveyards now finds itself in peril. The dead, it seems, have a way of lying directly in the path of progress. London's housing crisis and Kensal Green now stand face to face, their futures uncomfortably intertwined. Brompton, another of the Magnificent Seven, shares its borders with a multi-million-pound stadium, modern life pressing against the silence of the graves. But does this proximity diminish the sanctity of the grounds, or can the living and the dead truly coexist without harm? It's a question Kensal Green now forces upon the city, as London's plans inch ever closer to its gates. But before we speak of its future, we must return to its beginning, because only then can we understand why Kensal Green remains a vital artery in London's history. Before London swelled into the overcrowded capital it would become, the dead were buried close to home. Parish graveyards nestled beside churches held generations of families who had worshipped there every Sunday. But by the 19th century, the city's rapid population growth brought with it a grim consequence. Death outpaced space, graveyards overflowed, coffins were stacked atop one another, and decay became a public health concern no longer hidden behind church gates. Kensal Green was born from this crisis. Situated in West London, the cemetery spans two neighboring boroughs. Its main entrance opens onto Harrow Road, while a secondary gate at Alma Place, once known as the West Gate, leads toward the West London Crematorium and St. Mary's Roman Catholic Cemetery. Along the southern edge, a long wall runs beside the Paddington arm of the Grand Union Canal. Set into that wall are now defunct gates, silent witnesses to a time when barges carried away excavated earth, and on occasion delivered coffins directly by water. The idea of a grand garden-style cemetery wasn't new. London had been watching Paris from across the channel, where Père Lachaise transformed burial into something deliberate, almost poetic. In 1825, entrepreneur George Frederick Carden attempted to bring that vision to Britain. His plan failed, collapsing under skepticism and circumstance, but the seed had been planted. 5 years later, the city no longer ignored the dead piling beneath its streets. Churchyards were swollen, graves were reused too quickly, soil fouled by centuries of overcrowding. Death was no longer contained, it was seeping into the living city, and this time failure was not an option. In 1830, a powerful committee assembled politicians, financiers, architects, artists, men who understood that death, if properly organized, could be profitable. Together, they formed the General Cemetery Company. Its purpose was practical, sanitary, and quietly revolutionary: to remove burial from the parishes and remake it into something orderly, landscaped, and, if possible, beautiful. Kensal Green began as an idea before it became a place. 54 acres were purchased for £9,500, but what followed was far from simple. Gothic spires and Grecian restraint were asked to coexist. Faith set beside classical reason. Committees debated, designs fell away, and decisions were made quietly behind closed doors. Eventually, the company's director stepped in, commissioning architect John Griffith to bring order where there had been none. From that struggle, the cemetery took shape. Chapels rose, a monumental gateway followed. Thousands of trees were planted, saplings chosen with the understanding that they would outlive those buried beneath their shade. What emerged was not just a burial ground, but a landscape carefully shaped for mourning, where grief could move freely instead of being pressed into the crowded churchyards of the city. On the 24th of January in 1833, Kensal Green was consecrated by the Bishop of London. Within a month, the first funeral passed through its gates. But even here in death, separation still mattered. 39 acres were reserved for the Church of England, 15 for the dissenters, Protestant nonconformists who had been barred from Anglican churchyards for centuries. A sunken fence once marked the divide, stretching from canal to gate. On one side rose the dominant chapel, standing above Anglican catacombs equipped with hydraulic machinery to lower coffins gently into the earth. Across that line stood the dissenters' smaller neoclassical structure, equal in morality if not in prominence. The cemetery quickly became indispensable. During London's cholera epidemics of the 1850s, reformer Edwin Chadwick proposed closing nearly every other burial ground and expanding Kensal Green to a vast national cemetery. Parliament agreed. The public, though, didn't. The plan was abandoned, but the cemetery remained, privately owned and fiercely protected by its founding Act of Parliament. That protection still holds today. Kensal Green remains active with burials and cremations continuing, though now slowed almost to a standstill by the limits of space. Those laid to rest here may never be exhumed for development. When the land can no longer receive the dead, it must remain a memorial park, unchanged, unsold, and untouched by progress. Roughly 250,000 individuals lie within its grounds, resting in more than 65,000 graves. Nearly 1,000 are recorded in the Dictionary of National Biography. Nobility rests beside artists, engineers, soldiers, and individuals that history has forgotten. Many monuments lean at uneasy angles, slowly surrendering to the London clay beneath them. A quiet reminder that even stone is not immune to time. Inspired by Pere Lachaise, Kensal Green reshaped burial across the British Empire. From Sydney's Rookwood Necropolis to Waverley Cemetery overlooking the sea, its influence spread far beyond London's limits. And among those buried here are minds that altered the modern world, sometimes long after their bodies were laid to rest. Beneath the leaning stones of Kensal Green lies a man who imagined thinking machines long before electricity carried a single thought. Charles Babbage, mathematician, inventor, philosopher, who was born at the close of the 18th century, when calculation was performed by hand, and error was accepted as inevitable. Babbage found that intolerable. To him, error was not human, it was mechanical, and anything mechanical could be corrected. From that obsession came ideas the world wasn't ready to build. He envisioned machines that could calculate flawlessly and endlessly, engines of pure logic fashioned from brass, iron, and precision. His creation, the difference engine, was designed to remove mistakes from the mathematical tables that guided navigation, astronomy, and engineering. Then came his most daring vision, the analytical engine, a programmable machine using punched cards, capable of memory, conditional logic, and repetition. In its architecture, the modern computer already existed in Babbage's mind. But the 19th century couldn't follow where Babbage led. Funding vanished, partnerships fractured, his designs grew more ambitious, more complex, and remained unfinished. He became a man outpaced by his own brilliance, debated and admired, yet quietly set aside as progress moved on without him. Still, Babbage haunted London's intellectual life. His Saturday evening soirees drew scientists and aristocrats alike into candlelit rooms, where ideas moved as freely as wine. For a man devoted to logic, precision, and the eradication of error, one belief carried an unexpected contradiction. Babbage was a member of the Ghost Club, often described as the oldest paranormal society in the world. Though its history flickers in and out of existence, much like the phenomenon it sought to study, even the irrational, it seemed, deserved to be examined. He wrote obsessively, moving from economics to factory systems, from cryptography to theology, as if no discipline, whether grounded in science or shadowed by doubt, should be left unexplored. He cataloged the city's noises, rallied against its endless disturbances, and believed quite literally that every word ever spoken remained suspended in the air, pressed into matter itself, waiting to be heard again. To Babbage, nothing truly disappeared, not even death. When he died in 1871, his greatest machines were still unfinished. His brain was divided, half preserved for study, half placed on display. What remained of him was buried at Kensal Green, among monuments already beginning to slowly surrender to the earth. It would take more than a century for the world to finally catch up. It did, though not in the ways he could have imagined. In the late 20th century, when computing had become commonplace and machines finally thought in the language Babbage once sketched in ink, his name resurfaced in an unexpected place. A small American software retailer was founded under the name Babbage's, chosen in tribute to the man who first imagined programmable machines. The store sold games, code, and digital futures, commodities built upon principles he had once outlined more than a century earlier. Over time, the name faded. Babbage's merged, rebranded, and eventually became what the world now knows as GameStop. Millions would pass through its doors, unaware that the lineage of modern gaming and digital logic traced back to a grave in Kensal Green, and to a man whose greatest creations were never completed in his lifetime. Then in 1991, engineers built a working difference engine using Babbage's original plans and 19th century tolerances. It functioned perfectly. The genius had never been flawed, only delayed. Among these grounds lay another mind of consequence, a man whose pen once rivaled Dickens in shaping the imagination of a generation, William Makepeace Thackeray. He entered the world in comfort and left it with illusions carefully dismantled. Born in Calcutta to the machinery of an empire, he learned early that security was provincial. His father died when he was 4, leaving a boy already acquainted with loss and the fragile promises of life. By the time England claimed him, childhood had already taught its first lasting lesson: nothing promised remains. At school, Thackeray learned something no curriculum intended. Charterhouse was not a sanctuary of learning, it was rehearsal, a place where boys practiced cruelty behind polished manners, where class and power were learned early and enforced daily. Thackeray watched it happen. He endured it, and he would never forget. He spent the rest of his life writing about people exactly like them. Money came and went. It never stayed long enough to save him, only long enough to teach him how people behaved when it was there, and how they changed when it was gone. Law bored him, art tempted him, discipline failed him, but something else endured, an eye that was sharp, patient, and unsparing. Misfortune visited often, and Thackeray met it with the only way he knew how, by watching closely, recording faithfully, and surviving. Marriage promised him stability, but it delivered isolation. After childbirth, his wife's mind began to fracture, and slowly, irrevocably, she slipped away. Thackeray was left married in name only, alone with responsibility, guilt, and grief. Love became something to observe rather than trust. Work became shelter for him. He wrote constantly essays, satires, sketches, often under false names, as if honesty itself required a disguise. Then came Vanity Fair, a novel without heroes, written for a world obsessed with becoming one. Thackeray refused to flatter his readers. Becky Sharp didn't need redemption. Society did. The book wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake, it was colder than that. It suggested something far more unsettling, that lives are not ruined by great evils, but by small, relentless vanities, repeated until they hardened into fate. Fame followed, contentment, though, didn't. A final romantic encounter ended in a public embarrassment for him. A bitter break with Dickens, once a friend, now rival, sealed another loss. When Thackeray died on Christmas Eve in 1863, London mourned a moralist. Westminster Abbey claimed his likeness. Kensal Green, though, claimed his body. He was laid among the very classes he had dissected so mercilessly, neither forgiving them nor excusing himself. And yet London remained crowded with men who watched rather than belonged. Wilkie Collins moved through Victorian London like a shadow, observing the world with a sharp, unflinching eye. In his own time, some thought him the equal of Dickens, some even his superior in sheer popularity. The Woman in White, The Moonstones, were stories that kept readers breathless, hearts pounding, eyes scanning for secrets. Suspense, though, was really his craft. Reality, what he called the actual, was his canvas. Born in London in 1824, Collins was a small, sickly, and already wary of pretense boy. His father, an artist climbing the ladder of society, paired ambition with rigid piety. From an early age, Collins learned how easily virtue could be performed, and how useful hypocrisy could be used, especially on the page. He rode the omnibuses, he listened, he collected rumors and filed them away. Every glance, every whispered word became material for novels that peeled back the surface of polite society and exposed what lingered underneath. Money arrived as it often does and vanished just as quickly. A brief stint in the tea merchant's office offered little but boredom, and the one thing he needed most, time to write. And write he did, essays, plays, stories, many drawn from the grim realities of his own life: clandestine love affairs, cruel social rules, women trapped by circumstance, children abandoned or declared illegitimate, men and women undone by greed and secrecy. Collins saw it all, and he wrote it all down. He knew Charles Dickens personally, and their friendship became a collaboration in the shadows, one shaping plot, the other sharpening character, both roaming the same London streets. Yet Collins remained his own man, bolder where Dickens hesitated, more willing to drag hypocrisy and cruelty into the light the middle classes preferred to avoid. His novels thrilled the public, unsettled the respectable, and whispered of things everyone pretended not to see. He was never idle. Police reports from France, newspaper clippings, encyclopedias. No scrap of information was wasted, nor was his own life. Caroline Graves, Martha Rood, illegitimate children, secret households. Collins lived inside the very entanglements he wrote about. His private world was as knotted and unsparing as his fiction. And still the work continued, relentless, feverish, and uncompromising. Pain followed him. Addiction tightened its grip. Exhaustion shadowed his final years. He wrote anyway until he could no longer stand, collapsing into death in 1889. Collins left behind no tidy legacy, only stories where secrets fester, where society's pretenses are stripped away, and where the dark corners of the world are lit, just enough to make the reader feel uneasy. But Victorian London was shaped not only by those who reveled in its shadows, but by those who remained its surface. Born in 1806, Isambard Kingdom Brunel would live just 53 years, but in that time he transformed the world around him. The son of Mark Brunel, a pioneering engineer in Sophia Kingdom, whose own life had been shaped by revolution and imprisonment, Isambard grew up surrounded by invention, audacity, and danger. By an early age, he sketched bridges and buildings, absorbed Euclidean geometry, and learned to think in terms of scale and strain. By his 20s, he was working alongside his father on the Thames Tunnel, burrowing beneath the river while water pressed overhead and collapse loomed constantly. A tunnel shield of their own design kept the men alive, an act of engineering that bordered on the miraculous. Brunel's mind, though, never rested. Bridges, railways, viaducts, stations. He surveyed valleys and rivers with relentless precision, tracing paths where others saw only obstruction. He built the Great Western Railway, cutting through hills, spanning rivers, and stitching London to Bristol. Along its route, villages swelled into towns, reshaped by iron and speed. And then there were the seas. Brunel imagined ships the world had never known. The Great Western, the SS Great Britain, the first iron ship driven by a propeller, and the Great Eastern, his great babe, conceived to carry passengers across oceans without stopping. Vessels so large they seemed to defy their own weight, driven forward by nothing but human ingenuity. Even war and disease felt his influence. When Britain needed hospitals during the Crimean War, Brunel designed prefabricated structures that could be shipped, assembled, and used at once. Florence Nightingale called them magnificent huts. But genius is rarely gentle. Brunel smoked constantly, worked without rest, and ignored the limits of his own body. In September of 1859, aboard the very ship he had built to cross the Atlantic, he suffered a stroke. He returned to London and died 10 days later. He was 53. He now rests in the family vault at Kensal Green Cemetery. Around him lie the remnants of a century he transformed. Bridges, tunnels, railways, ships. Ideas too vast for a single lifetime. Plaques mark his works along rivers and rail lines, but his true monument endures in iron, stone, and steel. A mind made permanent. A ghost among the living, watching London continue to grow, still shaping the world he left behind. Among the more than 700 notable souls resting at Kensal Green, two are particularly remarkable. Royals. Unusual residents, royals usually lie in cathedrals or atop castle grounds. The first of these is Prince Augustus Frederick, Duke of Sussex, a rebel long before the term felt familiar. Some might note the irony: the title he bore would, 2 centuries later, pass to another prince whose life would be equally defined by rebellion and defiance. Born into the gilded cage of Buckingham House on the 27th of January in 1773, Augustus was the 6th son and 9th child of King George III and Queen Charlotte. A prince of privilege, yes, but unlike his brothers, he never sought glory in armies or navies. He moved through London and Europe with quiet defiance, a mind drawn to reform, to liberty, to causes considered dangerous by polite society: the abolishment of the slave trade, Catholic emancipation, relief for Jews, and the tolerance for dissenters. From the start, his life was bound by rules he would quietly bend. He married in secret, not once but twice, flouting the Royal Marriages Act both times. His first wife, Lady Augusta Murray, bore him children, Augustus Frederick d'Este and Augustus Emma d'Este. Yet law and royal authority tore their union apart. Money was granted, homes divided, custody assigned, but love, like freedom, remained forbidden. His second marriage to Lady Cecilia Buggin would again be a quiet rebellion against a world that prized rank over the heart. Augustus Frederick moved through society as both prince and outsider. Freemasonry called him master, science intrigued him, and religion absorbed him. He studied Hebrew, amassed tens of thousands of manuscripts, and presided over societies bridging knowledge, faith, and reason. He was a patron of the arts, a subtle challenger to centuries-old tradition, a man quietly reshaping the world around him. Yet the Duke was never just intellect and principle. Whispers followed him, clandestine unions, mistresses, and the careful navigation of love constrained by law. He lived in Grosvenor Square and Kensington Palace, yet his presence was felt everywhere: in thought, in policy, in the soft bending of rules that bound lesser men. On the 21st of April in 1843, Augustus Frederick died at Kensington Palace, aged 70. There was no state funeral, no grand parade. He only asked for quiet, for dignity preserved in simplicity. So he was laid to rest at Kensal Green Cemetery, in front of the main chapel, opposite the tomb of his sister, Princess Sophia. Here, among monuments and whispering stones, rests a prince, a rebel, a thinker whose life carved small freedoms into the iron weight of monarchy. If Augustus carved small freedoms against the iron weight of monarchy, his sister Sophia endured its heavier chains. Princess Sophia, the 12th child and fifth daughter of King George III and Queen Charlotte, was born on the 3rd of November in 1777 at Windsor Castle, a delicate flower in a gilded cage, watched over by governesses, chaperones, and the ever-present eyes of her mother. While her father doted on his daughters, indulging them with warmth and attention, their mother ruled with severity. Sophia and her sisters were cloistered, disciplined, and confined. Their days were a mixture of music, language, embroidery, and lessons, all punctuated by strict formalities. The young princesses often described their household as a nunnery, a quiet captivity masked as royal propriety. Sophia was beautiful, moody, and fiercely passionate, a temperament ill-suited to lifelong obedience. Though she never married, her heart was not without scandal. In the summer of 1800, whispers spread that she had given birth to an illegitimate child while staying in Weymouth. Some believed the father was Thomas Gary, the king's equerry, decades her senior, marked by a large purple birthmark. Others, darker in speculation, pointed to her eldest brother Ernest, Duke of Cumberland. Historians still today remain divided. The truth is lost, though the child, baptized as Thomas, was quietly cared for away from royal eyes, visited only occasionally by his mother. Her life was shaped by fragility and intrigue. Illness shadowed her, echoing the mental strains of her father. Later, her affairs were managed by Sir John Conroy, the ambitious comptroller of her niece, the young Princess Victoria. Conroy squandered her wealth, manipulated her influence, and used her as an informant on court intrigues. Yet even as her vision dimmed and her mind wavered, Sophia retained a sharpness of observation, a quiet agency within the chains imposed upon her. Despite confinement, Sophia's intellect and character drew admiration. She was cherished by the young Princess Charlotte of Wales, who found fascination in her gentle manners and the shadowed whispers of her past. Sophia's devotion to family, combined with her subtle rebellions, painted a portrait of a woman navigating love, secrecy, and power in a court that prized obedience over desire. Princess Sophia died on the 27th of May in 1848 at her home in Vicarage Place, Kensington, aged 70. She was buried at Kensal Green Cemetery in front of the central chapel, just across from her brother, Augustus Frederick. Here amid whispering stones and shadowed monuments lie the siblings who defied and endured the monarchy, one a rebel who bent the rules, the other a quietly passionate soul constrained by them, yet no less remarkable in the echoes she left behind. Remarkable could also describe the grounds of Kensal Green itself. Its paths wind and ebb like a slow tide, carrying beauty and decay together, moving without urgency. I usually like to set the tone at the cemetery at the start, but Kensal Green resists that. Its tone doesn't arrive and leave, it lingers. It follows you long after you've stepped back through the gates. Kensal Green is the only cemetery still operated by its original company, formerly known as the General Cemetery of All Souls. It remains under the care of the General Cemetery Company to this day. When you walk its grounds, you do more than pass between stones. You meet a steward of the past. The guides speak with reverence and acquaintance. Their admiration shows in every story, every monument where they pause, and every corner of the grounds. And yet, for all that care, visitors notice something else. The cemetery bears its age openly. Time presses heavily here. Stones lean, moss thickens, mausoleums darken. Kensal Green doesn't hide its years, it wears them quietly, without pretense. In 1936, a tale circulated known as the Living Dead Girl. It tells of a publisher wandering into a remote corner of the cemetery, where he stumbled upon the grave of a former love, Elise. The encounter stirred not comfort but guilt, whether memory or imagination. The story clung to Kensal Green, as so many things do, refusing to be buried completely. With its towering Gothic mausoleums, shadowed catacombs, and overground, unattended corners, Kensal Green has often been described as a horror fan's dream, but that description feels incomplete. This is not horror born of spectacle. It's the quieter unease of neglect, of beauty eroding slowly, of history that refuses to stay still. Since 1833, more than 250,000 people have been laid to rest here, burials and cremations, graves and catacombs. Over 2,000 individuals have been carefully researched so far, more than 1,000 of them recorded in the Dictionary of National Biography, and even then, it's only the beginning. Today we've only walked alongside a small handful of those who rest within these grounds. Engineers, writers, artists, performers, royalty, and rebels. People whose names once carried weight, and others whose influence was quieter but no less real. Here they lie side by side, not sorted by legacy or achievement, but simply by time. That's part of what makes Kensal Green feel so human. There will always be names we don't reach in a single visit, stones we pass without stopping, stories waiting patiently in the shadows of mausoleums and beneath weathered inscriptions. This isn't a failure of memory, it's the scale of it. Kensal Green doesn't demand to be understood all at once. It invites you to return, to notice something new each time, to slow down, to listen more closely. And yet a question lingers. Do Victorian cemeteries still have a place in our modern world? Places like Kensal Green, where time feels suspended. London builds upward now, tightening around spaces like this, enclosing them with walls of progress while the past remains quietly rooted in the soil. Kensal Green stands caught between remembrance and redevelopment, between the need for the living and the silence of the dead. So, what's the right path forward? Preservation at any cost? Adaptation at the risk of loss? Or something uneasy and imperfect in between? I'll leave that question with you. For now, the stories of Kensal Green slip back into stone, and the dead return to their uneasy rest. Yet they're never silent for long. Thank you for walking with us through the veil into Kensal Green Cemetery, descending once more into the hauntings of history. The gate is sealed, the veil drawn, yet death keeps no calendar, and so we shall return, as we always do, on the Grim.